Hi, everyone. I'm James Garbutt.
And I'm Denny Dumas.
And this is the Garbutt Dumas Real Estate Podcast.
Cooling off period update. I'm excited. Most of you consumers out there that are trying to pay attention and keep yourself updated with what is going to happen in BC real estate this year. You're probably confused and looking for more information because really since the initial announcement of this, excuse corny catchphrase, cooling off period came out in November. There really hasn't been any follow-up information, no details on how this is going to be rolled out or what, this is going to look like moving forward, when it's going to come into play. But there was a pretty interesting meeting that happened a few days ago. The BCRA, BC Real Estate Association, met with the local governments and just kind of shared the real estate industry's feedback to this idea of cooling off period and how we think it will affect the industry. So there were some really good talking points, I think. Just one, concerns with how this thing would be rolled out, but two, also suggestions on how it can be improved to actually meet the goal of helping consumers. And obviously the big thing and a big problem, big talking point in Greater Vancouver right now is housing pricing. And will this actually affect housing pricing? And the comments from BCRA, the comments from the real estate industry are likely not, and it could have the opposite effect. So we just want to give everyone an update on what's going on and share a little summary of that meeting a couple days ago.
Right. So the Real Estate Association put together this really comprehensive package they're calling the white papers. And what the white papers say is pretty much a breakdown of the recommendations from the Real Estate Association on how to best move forward and to best protect consumers. Because overall, that is the goal of BCREA, is to protect consumers. For starters, they're offering this idea of a pre-offer period instead of a cooling off period. A pre-offer period would be a period of time prior to the seller being allowed to look at any offers at all. During this time, they would need all of the documents available to the buyer so that the buyer can perform all of the due diligence that's needed before buying a property. An important aspect of this is that all the different buyers are allowed to do this at the same time for the same property. So basically, if you list on Monday, it would be mandatory that the seller not look at offers for at least 5 business days. During this time, everyone would have a fair shake at doing all the due diligence needed, knowing that this property wouldn't sell until they have time to perform their due diligence. This is a really important and really smart suggestion because often properties are listed without the right documentation, without all of the information needed, and everyone's kind of chasing their tails trying to perform all this due diligence really up until the last minute, up until offers are due. If you have a really good buyer's agent, they get this done. If you don't, they don't get it done, and then offer time comes and you're left making the decision to write an offer subject free without knowing everything that you should know about the property.
I think maybe quickly let's just summarize what cooling off period is for anyone who hasn't necessarily paid attention or heard the announcement or heard us talking about it on social media in November. So the proposal or the idea with very little information was cooling off period, meaning once an offer is accepted, there's a period of time after that offer is accepted where the buyer can essentially walk away from a deal. Now, there wasn't really, so this happens in new construction. It's called a rescission period. And with any new construction that you're buying from a developer in BC, you have a 7-day right of rescission, which means for any reason, you can decide not to go through with that purchase and there's no penalty to you. If you have paid a small deposit upfront to get that contract, you get that deposit back. How would that work for resale? I think it would be very, very cloudy, and the potential for more harm to consumers is, I think, higher.
It's an interesting point because Denny and I talked about this when we discussed the cooling off period, that we believed that period would promote an environment that only benefits sophisticated buyers with experience and deep pockets. And that's exactly what they said in this meeting. They said that this cooling off period only benefits people who are out, with the experience and money that can scoop up the properties. And as usual, these processes that they try to implement on the public usually benefit the wrong party that they're looking to benefit. It doesn't benefit new buyers in any way. They don't have deep enough pockets. They don't have the experience in purchasing, and their buyer's education is very much at the beginning, and they're afraid. And we're trying to remove that, which I think the pre-offer period can remove some of that.
There was a lot of question marks, so we're guessing a little bit, but one of the things we're guessing about is that there probably needs to be some sort of non-refundable deposit that is incorporated into an offer for it to be accepted, for you to have this 5-day period afterwards. And again, that benefits people with a lot of cash flow. That benefits the real estate investor. That benefits the wealthy person that already owns property. That does not benefit a first-time buyer. Asking a first-time buyer to put down a $10,000 non-refundable deposit would be terrifying when you are really scraping together every last penny to come up with a down payment for a property that is much more expensive now than it was 12 months ago. So again, we just, I think the confusion from the real estate industry was there was an announcement out of nowhere with very little talks with the actual people in the industry, and really no detail on how this is going to be implemented. And those kind of things, I know one thing you just mentioned was those kind of things really scare consumers. They don't have any information. They assume what government officials are telling them is going to be correct, in that this is going to help them afford more property. This is going to help them afford a better place. So then, like, we see it all the time when announcements like this are made, people kind of take a step back and hold off and wait 6 months. And that usually negatively affects them more than positively affects them.
Right. So one of the main points in the discussion a few days ago was that the BCFSA has to consult realtors on the ground. They need to consult the Real Estate Association before making announcements like this. This announcement, I'm going to go ahead and say this, did harm some buyers in the past 6 months.
For sure.
We have buyers that decided to wait because they thought this cooling off period would benefit them, because they had no information, they had a lot of speculation, and they had these sweeping declarations made about this cooling off period. And now, as we all know, the market has improved so much in terms of purchase price that a lot of those buyers that were afraid and waiting are probably not going to be able to get into the product that they were originally looking for. So making these announcements without doing the proper research and without consulting realtors is harmful, and it definitely did harm some people in this situation. There's no way around it. It absolutely did. To wrap up what the BCRAs was recommending for this procedure to move forward, it's a pre-offer period, immediate access to documents, and they want this policy to extend to all sales, not just sales on MLS. They need to extend to all sales, including off-market sales, to properly protect consumers. The next really big point that they brought up in this meeting is they believe very strongly that the biggest issue is the housing supply, and I don't think anyone can argue with that. We flat out do not have the housing supply that we should. The development approval process has to be revamped big time, and an interesting aspect of that is this permanent national housing roundtable that they're wanting to implement. That's permanent, and it extends from BC all the way to the other side of the country, and it helps with city planning, and it brings together all the stakeholders in the business, from developers to policymakers. Yeah.
I think it's important to note that the idea that BCRAs has put forward, one of their bigger ones is this, again, excuse the corny catchphrase, we did not make them up, cooling down period to counteract this cooling off period. So the cooling down period, noting that you have to be, I think they mentioned you have to be on market for 5 business days before accepting offers. This is the way that 90% probably of listings currently work in busy markets. Most agents will advise clients to list on a Monday, do showings throughout the week, showings on the weekend, have as much due diligence and documentation about the property, about the strata available to buyers, and then look at offers on Monday, Tuesday the following week. So this is a really good idea, I think, in terms of setting a standard for our industry locally. It will help consumers understand how this whole process works versus right now, there's no standard at all. Some properties, like we've had a few recently where agents have told us that they're waiting till Tuesday for offers, and you get a text on Thursday evening that first week, so 2 or 3 days after they listed, saying, seller got a bully offer and they've accepted, the property sold for 1.3 or whatever it is. So when those types of situations happen, consumers lose a lot of confidence in our industry. So I really like the idea of setting a standard that says, okay, the minimum amount of time that a property has to be listed for is 5-7 days, whatever they come up with, prior to looking at offers, just to allow people to have an expectation and understand how this is going to work.
Right. We do have a document right now that is required and really important. It's a DRPO, direction regarding presentation of offers. This is something that has to be signed before a listing can go live, and it lets consumers know when the seller is going to look at offers. This just needs to be more vigorously regulated. It's not regulated at all. They can change their minds. It's just a document that everyone signs and everyone says, yep, this is it. This is the document. But then they change their mind and then they just cross through it and sign it saying they've changed their mind. So this is really important, and I think it is a really important step forward to consumer protection, consumer trust, and ultimately to fairness, which is a big problem in the market right now. And they did cover some of that, and moving forward, a big component of this is more education for people like us, for people like Denny and I, people like brand new realtors, just more education, more expectation. If you listen to our podcast, you probably follow the real estate market. You probably have heard a lot of other realtors talk about different things. I think that our team really prides ourselves on staying informed and knowing what we're talking about. And I think that that's kind of, they're hoping that extends just straight across the board to the other 15,000 realtors in the area.
Just in Greater Vancouver. There's another, 9,000 in Fraser Valley? Yeah, there's a lot of realtors
Something
out there.
kind of scary that they did bring up in this conversation was that they're expecting 400,000 immigrants in BC. 400,000. 80,000 of those immigrants are expected to come to Greater Vancouver. Where are we going to put them? This is a housing supply crisis, and it needs to be addressed. And it's not going to be fixed by a cooling off period in real estate.
I think, that was my next point, is it's important to note for consumers that none of what we've talked about today, whether it's cooling off, cooling up, cooling down, cooling sideways, doesn't matter. However we're cooling. Sound like a air conditioning commercial, Carl.
It's ridiculous.
None of this is going to help housing prices. Literally none of it. And a lot of it actually is going to negatively affect housing prices, meaning they're probably going to go up. If they also open up this auction style thing, rather than the way that multiple offers are handled today, I think it will also help prices go up. But I think it's important to note that none of these ideas are affecting or addressing the actual issue here, which is we do not have enough supply for how many people want to live in Greater Vancouver. Last night is a prime example. We had a 1995 2-bedroom condo in Port Coquitlam. 70 people came through this week, and we had 9 offers. That one is sold now. Where are those other 69 people going to go? Because there just is not enough housing for them. And whether there is a cooling up period, down period, doesn't matter. There's still going to be those 70 people that want to purchase a home that are not available.
Right. Another interesting point that they brought up is a lot of people do like to blame investors for prices going up. But a really interesting point that sounds quite simple, but it does need to be said, is when an investor purchases a property, you're not losing housing supply. The housing supply is still there. Someone can still live in that property. You're not losing supply. There just isn't enough property. And not everyone can buy a property. So there needs to be rentals. There has to be rentals. There needs to be more rental-only buildings, and there needs to be more buildings that allow rentals that investors can purchase and then turn around and rent to people who have to rent.
It's a really big misconception, I think, that policymakers try to harp on, but it's really a good point that when an investor purchases a condo, they were saying it simply moves from a resale market to a rental market. And our rental market is as crazy as resale. If you have a condo, a townhouse, a house, basement suite to rent, and you post it on Facebook Marketplace or wherever, you're going to have 50 people reach out to you in the first few days trying to see it and regardless of what you post the price at, it's just, there just is simply not enough supply for people that want to live here in both rental and resale.
Right. So when we talk about rental prices, which is a whole hilarious circus of a subject, you really do, to make it fair, you really do have to give it to the person who's willing to pay the most. It's not fair to give it to somebody who would pay less when there's someone else that's willing to pay more. What happens to that person? They're still going to go somewhere else and look for a rental. That person is still out there. So you're not losing supply by having investors.
The desperation on the rental side almost is worse than the resale side. And I rented a property in the summer last year, had 35 people that saw it in like 2 days. And one of the ladies was so upset. And like, not upset at me, but more just like emotionally upset that they didn't get a place. Obviously, there is some sort of situation there where they're being kicked out of their current rental or whatever. And my reply to her was, I had to pick someone. Like there's 35 people, it has nothing to do, like it's nothing against you. I have to pick one of the 35. I'm really sorry it wasn't you, but like it is what it is. I don't know.
That's an overwhelming, the housing supply is the overwhelming problem that no one can deny. We need more infrastructure. We need to speed along development, the development process, the paperwork, all the nonsense. There are people in line waiting to build buildings, to build properties, and what are we doing? We're not approving anything. So that was a big one. Yeah, interesting meeting. Really exciting. I think for me, the most important information that came out of this was that there is a way to do it that is fair with the pre-offer period being holding back on offers, which is what's happening right now. It just needs to be regulated and implemented in a better way. And consultation of real estate, of the Real Estate Association before making sweeping announcements to protect consumers.
Maybe the last thing to touch on is this pre-offer period where buyers are doing due diligence. A lot of buyers, a lot of consumers, a lot of people that we work with have no idea what that due diligence is. And they rely heavily on us for finding out that information with them or for them, sharing it with them, educating them on what that information means. It would be interesting to have some sort of standard, and I don't even know how that would look, but like I think consumers rely heavily on the realtor that they're working with. And what percentage of realtors do the full amount of due diligence when purchasing a strata or a single family home going into an offer?
I'll give you a very good example. I offered on a townhome a week or two ago, and these clients and I had offered on a few that week. So and we lost out on a few. So by the time we got to the last one we were offering on, we didn't have as much time to do our due diligence. So I was quite literally doing it 24 hours, like leading up to offers being due. Looked at the Form B. The Form B said no rentals. I knew for a fact that complex allowed rentals. So I went to the agent and said, hey, this Form B says there's no rentals allowed. We need a new Form B. I know that rentals are allowed here. He didn't know if rentals were or weren't allowed, had no idea. It had been on the market for a week. He already had 3 offers in hand. The Form B is incorrect. I couldn't get a hold of the property manager when I finally did. They wouldn't speak to me. They wanted to speak to the seller. So it was, the offer presentation had to be pushed back 3 hours while we waited for this document. While that's going on, I'm looking through the property disclosure statement. I noticed that there's an item on the property disclosure statement that asks you if you've made any alterations to the property. They had signed no. They asked if there was any change to the electrical. They had signed no. And I remember, because I was physically inside this property, I remember I was in the garage and I saw a wire coming out from behind the panel and running up and over the garage to the other side. And then there was a plug there that I know wasn't original. It was probably for some type of power tool, maybe to charge a car. Anyway, there was certainly some aftermarket additions done. So I call the agent, hey, this says no, but there's a plug in the garage. Can you tell me like what that's all about? And he's like, oh yeah, I didn't even know about that. Yeah, the seller says that they put it in for a power tool without permits. So now I'm missing another document, which is a material latent defect document, and they have to change the PDS and add that there's a material latent defect, that there's electric work done without permit, and that there was an aftermarket addition. So that's a lot of due diligence that no other agent had done, because he already had 3 offers in hand. I was literally the last person. He was waiting for me to submit my offer, and those are what? Form B, important document. Property disclosure statement, important document. Material latent defect, important document. So yeah, to answer your question, no one's doing due diligence. No one is.
So in summary, the BCRA, yes, I believe their proposal is a better option than the 2 cooling up and off periods. But I don't think that is still solving any problems. It maybe is giving some sort of perception that, okay, something was done, we're trying to help the consumer, whatever. But I'd say, again, like coming back to my point of 90% of listings are run this way already. And if 5% of buyer's agents are going through this process of due diligence in 90% of the listings that run offers this way, why is that going to change if 100% of the listings are run this way?
Right. There has to be, and they spoke about this, there has to be more accountability from real estate professionals when it comes to due diligence. There absolutely has to be. And if you can't do it, you have to find someone that can help you. And if you can't find anyone that can help you, you need to refer the client to someone else that can. That's just the bottom line.
It's an interesting year that we're coming into with some of these proposals, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. One of the last kind of things that the lady mentioned, I think, is she the president of the BCRA? Yeah. Okay. What's her name? Betty. Okay. One of the last things she mentioned was this is not like a short-term thing that can be implemented tomorrow or next week or this spring. It's going to take a year or 2 years or a few years to actually understand how this is going to affect the way that real estate is done and come up with all these little details in between that can actually be implemented. So again, just like the quickness to pull the trigger on this announcement and just like show up to a press conference one day, cooling off period, see you later. We'll talk about it again on March 1st. Like, it's just so silly. And, but I mean, unfortunately, we're not in control of how that policy gets brought out, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in the next 12 months.
Yep, here we go, guys. As always, real estate market in Greater Vancouver.